Hello, and welcome to the Wine Educate podcast, where we explore WSET education, study tips, and practical advice for wine enthusiasts and professionals. I'm your host, Joanne Close. This is episode 73, and as promised, we're going to be covering the wine laws of Barolo and Barbaresco at the WSET Level 3. So as always, in these podcasts, I cover the level 3 info, but I also throw some other things in there because I'm trying to put all this in context for you. It can be difficult just to read that paragraph in the book and really understand the why and the how behind it all. So that is ultimately the point of what I'm trying to do. This is a tremendously fun topic. I do really love these wine regions. They are magical to visit. I took a group there a few years back. It was so much fun, quite an adventure. And I was there again this summer, but both times in July. Look, if you can help it, July is probably not the best time to visit this region. It's pretty hot, and the wines and the food are quite rich. If it's 100 degrees outside and you're having a gorgeous lunch and eating your veal tonado and having a Barolo, woof, it's a bit much. Anyway, the best time to go is probably in the fall, in October. And actually, there are quite a few fun slow food festivals, and one is coming up every other year. There's the Cheese Slow Food Festival in the town of Bra, and that is coming up literally in a few weeks, September 19th. Maybe we missed it this year, but, put that on your radar. The food in this region is just as renowned as the wine, and they are famous for things like truffles and, as I mentioned, cheese. This is kind of wild, but took my husband out for his birthday dinner on Monday to Saint Germain. If you do visit New Orleans, put this on your list, okay? It's a lovely restaurant. We did the fancy 10-course tasting menu, and Drew brought out the wooden box. And I was like, what is this? I'm not smoking a cigar. No. He opened it up, and inside were 3 gorgeous truffles. And he said these truffles were Australian winter truffles. For my Australian listeners, I had no idea. They were gorgeous. And of course, we were tempted to add them on and get them shaved on our food. So anyway, fabulous and interesting because now talking about this region, it is famous for its truffles. All right, so let's just talk about the two. They are often spoken about together. So I'm going to do a little bit of comparing of the two before I break them up and talk about them separately. Barolo is larger than Barbaresco. It's about almost 2,000 hectares. Barbaresco is smaller, about 677 hectares under vine. Barolo is slightly higher, of about 50 meters. If you need to have the slope lesson again, and if you haven't already listened to episode 70, please do so, because that's where the good slope lesson is. The better land is considered on these steep south-facing slopes. But the land here in both of these regions is so varied. There are some hills that are higher, there's different aspects, there's different soil types, and there is this gorgeous map. It's like a 3D map that they make, so it's like plastic, and you can run your hands over it and feel all the different heights and whatnot. It is a thing of beauty. If you have a soft spot like me for wine maps, I still think about this map. I probably should have bought it, but I couldn't figure out how to bring it home since it's a whole diorama. Anyway, I'm going to buy this map the next time I'm there. Looking at it in a book doesn't do it justice. These two areas are really close to each other. They're only separated by about 2 miles. So you can have lunch in Barolo and then go visit a vineyard in Barbaresco in the afternoon. But I will caution you that even though it may say it's only 10 miles from lunch spot to vineyard, it's going to take way longer than you think because of all the hills and the winding roads. And we found that if you are susceptible to car sickness, that you best pack the Dramamine, okay? It can be humbling. Let's just put it that way. So let's talk about Barolo on its own. Barolo has a much longer, prestigious history than Barbaresco. The early mapping of the vineyards happened in the late 19th to early 20th century, and some French enologists got involved. They're like, whew, look at this land. They work with some local visionaries, and they helped to identify some of the better crus. They knew this land was special, and they knew where the better wines were coming from. It wasn't made into an official DOC until 1966, and then it was granted DOCG status in 1980. The rules are that if they're labeled DOCG, these wines have to be 100% Nebbiolo. I'm not going to go into Nebbiolo in great detail. I think it deserves its own moment, its own podcast. I think this grape is phenomenal. I will say that it is high in acidity and high in tannin and capable of making sublime wines on the hills of Barolo and Barbaresco. It's important that I mention the tannins, however, when we talk about the aging requirements for these wines. The general elevation of Barolo is 300 to 500 meters. Again, these are south-facing slopes, and they have certain aging requirements and yield restrictions, and those are part of the DOCG law. We mentioned that Barolo is significantly larger than Barbaresco. There's always a controversial, dramatic part of my wine podcasts, and this would be it, because in the 1980s, it was about 1,100 hectares, and then in 2013, it had increased in size by 50%. That is a lot. That is a big jump. Why did this happen, and how was it allowed? Well, it was all officially legally done. The appellation system granted these areas into the appellation, but it wasn't without some grumblings and some controversies. I'm going to get to the bottom of this because this is a really interesting topic. It's not for today's, but know that they had huge explosive growth, but it is still widely recognized that the older original sites still are the better sites. So perhaps a bit of buyer beware or buyer caution that there's some difference in quality in this region, well, just like any other region. You have 11 villages in Barolo. If the wine is all from one village, the village name can appear on the label. And then they have crus. I've got the number 170 to 180 crus. To me, that means that changes are happening. New crus may be added, but that's to give you a ballpark number. And if the wine comes all from that specific cru, then it can have the cru on the label. These are really small sites. Nebbiolo is the main grape here, and it has to be 100% Nebbiolo for it to be DOCG Barolo, but there are other grapes here, things like Dolcetto and Barbera, but these are put under different appellations. So Langhe DOC and Alba DOC, these can be tremendously good values, especially Langhe. So you get a Langhe, and it could be 100% Nebbiolo, but just maybe the yield was slightly higher that year than it should be, but it could have been from one of these amazing sites. That's where some wonderful bargains can be found. Also, I would say that the Langhe wines are ready to drink sooner and may be good for lunch in July. Let's just put it that way. The oak aging requirements. Per the law, you need a minimum of 38 months total aging, and 18 months need to be spent in wood. Notice they don't specify the type of wood. All the wines are released the January of the 4th year after harvest. There's been a bit of drama as well with the aging in oak. Now, I mentioned that Nebbiolo has high tannins, and like Cabernet Sauvignon and Sangiovese benefits from time in oak to soften those tannins, hence the rules mandating it. And traditionally, they would age it even longer than the law really said. There was a movement in the 90s to shorter maturation in new oak for more approachable styles. And during that time, you had like the old school and then the newer people making the wine, and there was a bit of drama between the two. This has worked itself out a bit, as it always does. And now many producers are opting for less extraction, but the longer aging with a balance of new and neutral oak. Just a reminder to my level 3 students that there are many possible juicy essay questions within this topic. And in the newsletter, I am covering one every week. I'll give you a question and then answer it the following week. So I would recommend signing up if you haven't. wineeducate.com, the green newsletter, sign up button at the top. All right, Barbaresco DOCG. Poor Barbaresco, long in the shadow of Barolo. It's so weird. Some books, like I pulled a book off the shelf and it said Barolo the king and Barbaresco the queen. I was like, huh. Anyway, everyone has different ways of classifying these things. But really, Barolo had the fame long before Barbaresco did, but they were making wine in Barbaresco at the time. It's not like it was newly planted. It just didn't have the recognition. Even as recently as the 40s and 50s, it just wasn't really on the radar for folks. But it did get its DOC and its DOCG at the same time as Barolo. In 1966, got its DOC, and then 1980 got its DOCG. The big difference is it's located at lower elevations. It still has those south-facing hills. It does also have a strong influence from the Tanaro River, which acts as a moderating influence. And the Nebbiolo is going to ripen here earlier than Barolo. So the resulting style is going to be a more fruit-forward style. They're still very elegant and maintain the classic acidity and tannin, but a little more fruit-forward, a little more ready to drink a bit earlier. The region covers 4 municipalities, and we mentioned that it's about 677 hectares. That's pretty small for a wine region. And just to put it in perspective for you, a region like Montepulciano di Abruzzo is about 17,000 hectares. That's 42,000 acres. These are boutique winemaking regions. They are limited in the amount of grapes that they can make. Therefore, you know what happens there. The price goes up. And to go back to Barolo and its big explosive growth, there is no plans on the books there for it to increase the hectare allowance anymore. I think they put a stop to that. In Barbaresco, however, there are some plans to increase, but very moderately. They're allowing about 7 hectares of growth per year with a careful eye to watching what climate change is doing. So if they're a bit lower in elevation than Barolo, they're going to be more susceptible to this extra heat. So perhaps they're looking at areas with further elevation to plant. Also, there's a push to be able to plant on northern facing slopes. Very interesting stuff, what climate change is doing to wine and winemaking decisions. But Barbaresco is no longer hurting here, people. Don't feel too bad for Barbaresco. It is now was considered a deal compared to Barolo. Well, friend, I'm sorry. I think that may be over. Sadly for us, the prices are going up. And we visited quite a few Barbaresco producers, and I couldn't help noticing all the renovation that was going on. Building out of tasting rooms, expansions of accommodations. The banks have no problem lending money to Barbaresco producers. And if the banks are lending money, you know business is good. On the converse of that, we went to visit Luigi Giordano and met with Matteo. These wines are fabulous. If you haven't discovered them, you should seek them out. And they are just outside of the town of Barbaresco itself, which is wild to me. The population of Barbaresco is 700 to 750 people. That is so small. So their vineyard operations are right there. And Matteo and his new wife were lamenting the fact that they couldn't find their own place to live. They were still living with the family, but wanted to start their own family. And because the price of everything had gone up so much, they were priced out of finding a house. That's the good and bad of growth of the vineyard regions. The aging requirements here are less, which makes sense because these wines are not as big as Barolo. Minimum 26 months, total aging, 9 months in wood. Again, released the January of the 3rd year after harvest. So I couldn't help but wonder what the January thing was about. So yes, you're welcome. I figured it out. It is officially set by the regulations because it aligns with the vintage traditions. So when the wines would be naturally ready for release anyway. It also helps with the taxing and labeling practices, but also, and this is really sneaky and really smart, it gives distributors and importers a clear indication of when wines are released. Super smart. Like Barolo, the best wines are single vineyard. Here we have 8 to 10 crus. Again, okay, why not a definitive number, Joanne? I don't know, right? Don't shoot the messenger on this one. The book says if you count minor subplots. So again, to me, that means this is an evolving thing. Okay? Great. All right, that was lots of information for you all on these regions. And I realized I could talk a whole other episode about the styles, maybe go into some of these, the back history and whatnot. Just super fascinating, interesting wine regions. And next week on Tuesday, we are going to do Valpolicella. And you say, Valpolicella, Joanne, are there not more regions that are more relevant? Well, if you look in the level 2 or level 3 textbooks, Valpolicella is very relevant. And you're going to need to know the differences between all the styles and how the wines are made. Oh, that's all for now. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you on Tuesday.